Imagine you're me, Josh. Also, it's 2019, and you're watching Frozen 2. It stinks hot wet ass. Whole movie, bland, unoriginal, but Jesus Christ, does it look pretty. But then you get to that one scene where Elsa has to cross an ocean for some reason, and there's like a cool water horse fight scene. There's no dialogue, just a really, really good soundtrack and a cool water horse, and it feels like this scene was made for this soundtrack. And you actually catch yourself being blown away for like 3 minutes. What could you, 2019 Josh, be thinking in this moment? Whatever happened to Fantasia? I don't usually make videos like this, specifically where I don't show my face, but I don't know, man, I just didn't really feel like it. But for people new here, this is what I look like, and there I go. And now we're gonna be talking about an animated kids movie. I'm basically Mr. Krabs. But you know what? I think I'm gonna lean into that bit a little harder. Here's my OC. Drew like a dark, fucked up version of the Schaeferillis guy. Just a glimpse into my dark reality. A full stare into my twisted perspective would probably... Here's a super brief general history about the first Fantasia, because I think putting it in context is important. Fantasia was the third animated movie made by the company. Walt Disney wanted to make a new type of movie. You'll want to keep that in mind. This was an attempt from Walt to bring animation the respect he believed it deserved, and also give new and old generations a peek into something that, especially at the time, had a paywall behind it. Which is classical music. Make music snobs appreciate cartoons, and cartoon fans appreciate classical music. This was the goal. Make these artistic things more accessible to the public. Also, did you know his dad was a socialist? Which I don't know. In retrospect, that's just really funny. So essentially, it's a mini concert feature with 7.5 musical segments, covering classics like excerpts from the Nutcracker Suite, Dance of the Hours, Toccata and Fugue, No voice acting, no sound effects, just the orchestra taking us on a little tour through means of hand-drawn visuals. There's a lot I am not covering regarding the making of this movie, but I feel like the only important thing for this video is talking about the music. Leopold Stokowski was the perfect conductor for a movie like this. He was a showboat and rejected a lot of traditionalism in the Western classical world and embraced things like freehand conducting like we see in the movie. You need to realize that they needed to manipulate classical music that a lot of elitists would not like. This is just an example. In the sequel, Fantasia 2000, they cut Beethoven's Fifth to about 5 minutes. Despite them knowing that a lot of critics and classical conductors would hate that they did that. You need to put it in all of its beauty and put the music in the context in which it was designed for. Cool. Yes. Makes sense. Understandable. But have you considered Beethoven's Fifth is 35 minutes long? If you personally just do not fuck with the music selection or the alterations they made to the music, fair, that is completely valid, but also refer to the graph. Where are you here? What he envisioned for Fantasia was that it would never really end. He wanted to keep adding different segments to the film so that it would be a different experience every time you went. So kind of like a road show. Okay, so remember that. What I just said, just remember that. And that would have been the case, but people don't usually remember this. But Fantasia was a big financial failure at the time. It killed Walt Disney. It was only in re-releases in the 60s and 70s where it actually found its audience. The communists, not really. More accurately, it just became a classic to college students. They found it psychedelic and artistic. But in 1940, critics compared Walt to Hitler for how bad they thought the film was. Now why would they say a thing like that? Walt Disney's dream of making more of Fantasia never came to be, and he died believing it was a failure. You can't see me right now, but I'm smoking a cigarette and shaking. Although it was finding its footing in home video, Fantasia was kind of falling by the wayside, being lost to time, until something unbelievable and daring and fantastic happened. Fantasia video game for the Sega Genesis! Holy shit!
We did it, Joe. We really did it, Joe.
I can't explain it, but this game is so fucking funny to me, man. It has a bunch of enemies, all from the different segments of the movies, like dinosaurs, centaurs. The only cool part of the game is that they made like a 16-bit rendition of the classical music. The not so cool thing, this shit is borderline unplayable. You might say the game is just bugged to hell. Like, look at this. There's no way. But according to the instruction manual, anything can happen in a dream. So just get good. Anyways, yeah, I beat the game. Sure is lonely at the top. The whole whatever happened to Fantasia, well, Roy Disney was thinking the same thing. Roy Disney is Walt Disney's nephew. He could not draw for shit, but he understood that animation was the most important artistic expression for the company. Was he perfect? No, but he loved his animators and had so much respect for real storytelling through that medium and wanted to keep that for the sequel 2000. To keep the whole buddies with the conductor tradition going on, Roy Disney was going to work with Bernstein, actually, but that motherfucker died and was gay. So instead it was this guy, James Levine, who was also gay in the non-consensual and pedophilic way. Most likely, everything you like about Fantasia 2000 is probably because of him, and Michael Eisner is a fucking snake. Not to break the very well-kept illusion that this is a well-thought-out video, but I just need to be blunt. The reason why I'm telling you all this is because I'm greedy. It's sickening, really. It's very easy for me to lay in my own filth and to say I want another Fantasia or something remotely like it to be on the big screens now. Those darn animators are holding out on me. Because I mean, people have tried, which we'll go more in depth into later. People really tried, but it sure isn't easy to do. Fantasia 2000 was meant to ride the new high from the home video Fantasia lovers, but it was a fucking nightmare to produce. An example of this is Eisner. He only saw Fantasia as nothing more than a risk and was essentially doing everything he could not to give it the green light. But then one fateful day, Michael Eisner attends a graduation and his creative juices, they just start flowing. And he thinks, we might have something here. So next day he bursts into the studio, calls in an immediate meeting, and says this. Guys, you know the graduation song Pomp and Circumstance and how everyone has good memories with it? Well, I have the best idea for it, guys. So what we should do is some weird multiverse shit and get all of the princesses together and have like this coronation ceremony thing. But also it's not just the princesses, it's gonna be the princes too, but also the Peter Pan children and Alice from Alice in Wonderland. And also I think Donald Duck should also be there too, and they're all gonna get together and they're gonna reveal their babies. They're gonna show all their babies, and the villains will be there supporting too. And everyone's just gonna be happy, and Jasmine and Snow White and Cinderella, they're all in Mulan, I think. They're all gonna have a good time. Witnesses say that after he was done with his pitch, there was a terrible silence in the room. And then Ward Kimball, one of Walt Disney's original 9 old men, breaks the silence and says, quote, "That is the stupidest fucking idea I have ever heard. Kill yourself." Okay, he didn't actually say that, but he did say the first part. But Eisner did insist on Pomp and Circumstance being in the movie, and hooray, corporate won't cancel the movie. And that's where the whole fucking Donald Duck Noah's Ark short comes from. And I actually kind of like this one despite all of the stuff. And just like his predecessor, Fantasia 2000 also flopped at the box office. And you can also see creative decisions that were absolutely trying to appeal to a mainstream audience. Certain shorts even reflect this. But the thing is that Fantasia and Fantasia 2000 are objectively good movies. Racism incoming. The next 2 minutes is me just ranting about things I hate, and I was thinking about cutting it out, but at this point, I think I'm doing this channel a disservice by not including at least one that people can just skip. So in the meantime, here's some rats to look at that I babysat for a little bit. Unlike the actual waste of sperm Asmongold, I actually chose to have these rats in my room. So please just bear with me for a little bit. But watching other people's videos on Fantasia while preparing for this video, I realized that a lot of them are really fucking annoying. I like to put them in two categories. One of them is usually higher production and will say something like, yeah, we all know Fantasia is mid as fuck, right? And at the end, they're always like, well, at least they tried, because they're kind of riding on the fact that it was a financial failure, which we all know is telling of a good or bad movie. And then the second type of video is arguably more frustrating. Boils down to the first Fantasia is an untouchable masterpiece and was the pinnacle of human creativity and can do no wrong. Fantasia 2000, on the other hand, is ass, shit, and farts, and they only had one good song. Because there's one video that does it really badly, but I don't want to put smoke up their ass. But how are you gonna criticize 2000 for one thing when the original did the exact same thing? CinemaSins has ruined everything. The sequel is not perfect, far from it. But let's acknowledge that the original is not untouchable, like the Olympus segment. It sucks, and there are lots of reasons why someone's allowed to think that. Like, even the creators in this one documentary, they don't say it explicitly, but it feels like them themselves aren't proud of it and are trying to explain why it turned out like that. I know there doesn't directly have to be a story, but nothing happens. They just kind of fuck around and get drunk. And also, Disney Plus is fucking crazy. I went on to go watch Fantasia, and then it comes with a disclaimer saying that they decided to keep the racist elements of the original to learn from it and start a conversation. Okay, cool, whatever. Go and watch the movie, and then I get to this one scene where this character is just moving really weirdly, and at first I was like, okay, just like janky animation, and then it crosses my mind, surely Disney Entertainment Studios kept their word and didn't omit any of the racist characters. You know, I don't think we should bring that back if they made another Fantasia. Anyways, what makes a Fantasia? Sorry I'm saying the Fantasia word so much. Seems pretty simple at first, just animation paired with classical music. But once you start getting into the nitty-gritties, it starts to get a little more complicated. Reminder, Walt Disney wanted this to be a new type of movie. So what exactly makes a Fantasia movie a Fantasia movie? And what makes it different from the things being made now? I'm gonna list a couple of things, but one trumps all. Music must come first. The music comes before anything else. Okay, so just imagine with me, we're making another movie that fits into this genre we're creating. Something I thought a lot about while making this video was if classical music, or the traditional Western classics, is an integral part to the DNA. And I think I'm gonna say no. What we would lose with classical music is like the fancy embellishments and dramatic impacts, and to me what feels the most important is the creative challenge of trying to make a story out of the multiple movements. So why do I think it shouldn't be there? Well, because I didn't say that. And also, there is nothing wrong with the classics. If you haven't heard that one Nutcracker song, damn. However, restricting it just to this type of music feels restrictive just for the sake of being restrictive and annoying. We also need to keep in mind that there are composers to this day making masterful symphonies that are not attached to film scores or theater. Does this kind of detract from Walt Disney's vision? Yeah, pretty much. Don't get me wrong, this is one of my favorite parts about both of the movies. Like little things when you watch the orchestra like warm up and set up, little details like this are very cutesy. But it feels like we're kind of missing the point, no? What I am about to say is much easier to notice in retrospect, but Walt Disney had a goal, yes, to be a bridge for people to be exposed to classical music. However, that isn't exactly what the impact was. Like all art, you can have a goal, the point, and an impact. To me, the impact and the point of something like Fantasia is to expose people to music they wouldn't otherwise listen to. These two movies alone have changed the way so many people visualize music, for better or for worse. Why restrict that to one type of music? Yeah, that's my argument. Like, I mean, everyone's favorite is a jazz composition. Like, shut the fuck up. Pretty much any music works, in my opinion, as long as it is instrumental. I make an exception for chants or choirs. I feel like the thing that makes visual music so appealing is the animation was created without guidelines of what the music is actually about, because those feel so much more different than like the Beatles telling you to hold someone's hand or some other communist shit. I will not let Disney get away with that. Could you imagine 5 years from now, you're watching another Fantasia and Espresso by Sabrina Carpenter comes on? Let's talk about sound effects. This has got to be the biggest thing separating Fantasia from other animations being made today, even the ones that directly take inspiration from it. Am I going to draw a line in the sand and say no sound effects allowed? I kind of don't really care either way. There is really creative ways of doing musical sound effects that I've seen, like that Pixar Sparks short Self. They do these fun little things where they communicate with notes. I don't know, it's just kind of cool. The thing is, Fantasia does have sound effects. It's the music. This is a technique called Mickey Mousing, I wonder why. And here is some obvious examples of that happening. Yes, there are cases like Firebird or Night on Balding Mountain where the music is there just to express an emotion. However, the impacts definitely do line up still. This is mostly due to the type of music they're using. Regardless, I love Mickey Mousing. And I remember thinking as a kid, why didn't they do that with all the scores in movies? Well, there are lots of reasons why, but one of those reasons is because the music does not come first. In fact, composers have very little to do with the making of the movie up until it's basically done. This brings me to the last and most important thing I feel is needed to create this Fantasia-like art. Music must come first. And it's pretty rare when big production movies don't leave the composer to create the soundtrack as a response to the film. I am not the biggest fan, but if you want to learn more about it, watch this video by Sideways, which, speaking of, please come back, Sideways. Please listen to the sound of my voice, baby. You know where home is. But let's look where that is not the case. Please look to Interstellar. Christopher Nolan and Hans Zimmer actually do this a lot, but Christopher Nolan wrote Hans Zimmer a letter or just a page of general themes and ideas he wanted to keep, didn't tell him the genre or the scope or basically anything about the movie, and he said, write me a piece based on these ideas. So Hans Zimmer wrote Interstellar, and then after he sent it to Christopher Nolan, he was like, oh, by the way, it's a giant space sci-fi thing. What? So Hans Zimmer completed the soundtrack, then Christopher Nolan finished the script and started filming, listening to the music while doing the whole process. I think giving the creative freedom to the composer made the music better and the movie better. I could give a lot of niche examples where this was the case, but my main point is that this is not a hard concept to really grasp because it's almost intuitive. Art and music go hand in hand in a lot of different ways. Take Kandinsky, for example. He listened to music while making his abstract paintings because he had a sensory condition called
Synesthesia.
The best way I can describe this is like a blending of the senses, where one observable thing is perceived by two of your senses at the same time without thinking about it, or just perceived in a very different way. Some examples of this is like hearing the word college and it reminding you of the taste of earwax. So in this abstract painter's case, he saw objects and colors moving when listening to music. This painting by Kandinsky was made while listening to an Arnold Schoenberg piece. The yellow represents horns, the deep blues represent cellos. Problem is that we're seeing a still image. We are seeing the entire piece all in one canvas. There's no time represented. And I think this is the reason why I love Fantasia, because the very first segment of the very first Fantasia is like an animated Kandinsky painting. But also, No, it's an animated Oscar Fischinger animation. And I do not mean this figuratively. Oscar Fischinger literally helped make this segment. For those who have not seen it or don't remember, the MC introduces the whole concept of the movie by compelling the viewers to try and find their inner synesthesia and imagine sound and color. To make this, Disney saw Fischinger's non-representational animation and wanted to make something like it, so we just put him as an animator. His work is amazing. Like, remember this fucking Google Doodle? That's how you know you've made history. They're usually very short in length, but like, let's take a look at his take on like Sorcerer's Apprentice. Oh shit, that actually might be more satisfying than the movie. So we are left with a more pure version of visual music, but also no, this isn't a Oscar Fischinger animation because he quit and isn't even mentioned in the credits. He made like 3 animations in his actual abstract animation style, and Disney just did not like it. He felt that it would, quote unquote, offend the audience, and was coming to terms with justifying the whole concert feature's existence. So no, I am sorry. This is not pure abstraction. Cause see that? That's a violin. And that's just a fucking guy. Now you could say they did a better job in the 2000s version with their abstract section, but no, it is still not anything like the experimental animation stuff like what Oscar Fischinger or Walter Ruttman or Norman McLaren were doing at the time. There's a very clear narrative being presented, and for the love of Jehovah's Witnesses, I do not want to get you to think that these 2 introduction segments are bad, though. They are maybe the best part of both movies. Now we can finally talk about the thing I actually wanted to talk about this whole time. I bring you the political compass. This isn't from anything actually scholarly, I just kind of made this up. The x-axis is visuals going from abstraction to representational, while the y-axis is the same thing but with the story. Experimental versus literal. And it's probably more complicated than this once you start bringing up more examples, but it works for now, so just whatever. So where would a movie like Spider-Verse be located here? Probably like right here. Realistically, it only dips its toes into abstraction, which allows it to have a very cool stylized look to it, but we still know why things are happening. And I'd say 99% of the time, we know what we're looking at. There are examples like Uncanny Alley, where it is clear what we are looking at, but the why we're looking at it leaves it to a very experimental narrative. So I'd say actual visual music or abstract animation like they were doing in like early 20th century would be located around here. It's such an interesting medium from a cinematic perspective because it still shows art in time, but the only reason for movement is reacting to what is already there, which is very anti-story. There is a very cool niche area right here that just has some of the fucking coolest stuff, but this spot right here, that's for another video. The problem with a lot of this is that where do you put it? Video art has existed for a long time, but it usually ends up in a museum. And a lot of early abstract animation ended up here too, or at like random clubs. But for things like visual music, where do you really put it? For like a 7-minute, purely abstract animation, where do you show that off? That's the problem. You can't really show it in a theater. It's hard to do it logistically in a museum. And I think this weird in-between is kind of what led to this not really expanding like other movements. And that's kind of disappointing. There's not even a subreddit, guys. There's this really good book, Pulses of Abstraction, that kind of takes an artistic philosophy approach to it all, how this is a logical progression of humans' relationship with visual and temporal art. It gets a lot into like metaphysics of lines and arts and intervals, and I don't know, some people will think it's neat, but the point is that I'm not crazy. Despite how limiting and suppressive the environment for animation often is, I find it fascinating that there's some kind of invisible force pushing people to keep doing it just cuz. To quote Andrew Johnston, every time an animator animates, he is potentially reactivating the memory of the moment in which the elements of cinema got together to form the tightly knotted entity that is live action cinema. Animation is based on dissociative, disjunctive action inflicted upon the very structure of cinema. And quite frankly, it's kind of inspiring. Fantasia has been flop after flop, but the way I see it is that human creativity is an immovable object, and animators have really been pushing for another installment in the series. They've pretty much already made the third Fantasia. You've just never seen it. It would have been called Fantasia 2006, and there exists 4 entire completed shorts that eventually had to be released separately because it didn't get greenlit, and not all of them are from the same production period either. One of them actually was started by Salvador Dali in 1945, and it was only completed because of, guess who? Roy Disney. All of them combined, plus the cut finished Claire de Lune segment from the original, would have stacked up to be about 25-30 minutes. There's more to talk about, obviously, about it, so I'll probably just leave some more fun facts in the description if you're interested. But what really matters is, even when there isn't a space for it, it still finds a way to get made. I understand that I have probably by this point become seemingly untrustworthy because I have played tricks on you. But I'm gonna do it again. Hear me out, okay? I said earlier that the abstract animation movement didn't really take off, which I will say is true, especially if you compare it to other modern art movements. But it would really hurt my argument here if it turned out that people just all of a sudden stopped making abstract animation, which luckily for me, that could not be farther from the truth. In my meek opinion, I don't see abstract animation as really a genre that the collective general audience really accepts. And I think that passes along to artists because you don't see them even acknowledging as to what it is. Because whenever I see new examples of it pop up on social media, it's never described that way. Usually it's graphic design visuals or just playing around in your early animation class. Or fucking EDM backgrounds. But I think it's kind of like a double-edged sword situation because it does lead to a more pure sense of creativity from artists, but it also kind of makes it harder for people to find and dissect and talk about. And some of this shit is legitimately pushing science. The way that people are using sound to animate something. You can tell that I'm very passionate about this, surely. All I'm saying is that this stuff deserves your attention, especially in the current way that art is treated and produced with just actual drooling skull fucker stuff being made. Just pick the scab, scratch that itch. To me personally, this weird shit kind of feels like a necessity. But how else do I get exposed to this stuff, Josh? And to that I say, your phone is listening to you. You're probably gonna see more of this stuff anyways. I want to see more Fantasia or anything like it. It's there. Artists still make art. However, I still want more of it, bigger production, bigger, Maybe this just puts a face to some creative itch someone has been having. I don't know. Yeah.